The galaxy watched as 10,000 years of Jedi tradition crumbled in a single moment. But what if it hadn't been the prequel-era Jedi facing this betrayal? What if the targets had been the Old Republic Jedi? Warriors who battled Sith Lords as a Tuesday routine, who wielded the Force like a weapon of mass destruction, and who treated war not as a last resort, but as an art form. Today we're diving deep into one of Star Wars' most fascinating what-if scenarios. Could the Old Republic Jedi have survived Order 66? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, and today we're tackling a question that's been burning in the minds of Star Wars fans ever since we first witnessed the devastating efficiency of Order 66 in Revenge of the Sith. The execution of Order 66 wasn't just about superior firepower or tactical surprise. It was the perfect storm of Jedi complacency, Sith manipulation, and institutional decay. But the Jedi of the Old Republic era were fundamentally different warriors, operating in a fundamentally different galaxy. So here's what we're going to explore. First, we'll examine exactly why the Clone Wars era Jedi fell so catastrophically. Then we'll dive deep into what made the Old Republic Jedi so different: their training, their mindset, their connection to the Force, and their relationship with warfare itself. Finally, we'll run through some scenarios to see how they might have fared when the clones turned their guns around. But before we begin, let's establish our timeline. When I say Old Republic Jedi, I'm primarily referring to the Jedi from roughly 4,000 to 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the era of the Great Hyperspace War, the Mandalorian Wars, the Jedi Civil War, and the New Sith Wars. These were Jedi who lived in a galaxy where war was constant, where Sith Lords weren't myths, and where survival meant being ready to fight at a moment's notice. To understand why the Old Republic Jedi might have survived, we first need to understand why the prequel-era Jedi didn't. And it wasn't just because they were caught off guard. For 1,000 years, the Jedi had been peacekeepers, not warriors. Think about what that means: an entire millennium where lightsaber combat was more ceremonial than practical, where Force powers were used for meditation and diplomacy rather than battlefield dominance. Mace Windu himself admits in Attack of the Clones that their ability to use the Force has diminished. This isn't just about sensing the future, it's about everything. Their combat reflexes, their battle instincts, their willingness to make hard, tactical decisions in the heat of combat. But the real killer was their institutional arrogance. The Jedi Council had become so confident in their role as galactic peacekeepers that they couldn't conceive of a threat from within. They trusted the Senate implicitly. They trusted the clone army implicitly. And most fatally, they trusted that the Sith were truly extinct. This is crucial. The prequel Jedi had no experience dealing with Sith manipulation on a galactic scale. When Palpatine played his long game, they were fighting an enemy they didn't understand, with tactics they'd forgotten. The Clone Wars themselves were a trap, but not just in the obvious way. Yes, Palpatine engineered the conflict, but the real trap was psychological. The Jedi became generals overnight, commanding clone armies in massive set-piece battles, but they never truly adapted to being military leaders. Watch the Clone Wars series. You'll notice that even the most competent Jedi generals like Anakin and Obi-Wan still approach warfare with a peacekeeping mindset. They're trying to minimize casualties, they're hesitating at crucial moments, they're still thinking like diplomats rather than warriors. And this is where the clones had them beaten. The clones were bred for war, trained for war, lived for war. When Order 66 came down, it wasn't just that the Jedi were caught off guard, it's that they were mentally unprepared for their friends to become enemies in an instant. Let's break down what actually happened during Order 66. The Jedi weren't just outnumbered, they were psychologically shattered. We see it in their faces: confusion, betrayal, desperate attempts to understand rather than simply survive. They wasted precious seconds trying to reason with their clone commanders, seconds that cost them their lives. Master Plo Koon dies not because he lacks the power to survive a starfighter attack, but because he can't believe it's happening. Commander Cody shoots Obi-Wan not through superior tactics, but because Obi-Wan trusts him completely. The prequel Jedi died because they were still trying to be peacekeepers, in a moment that demanded warriors. Now let's talk about the Jedi who might have survived. The Old Republic Jedi were forged in constant warfare, tempered by continuous betrayal, hardened by facing actual Sith Lords on a regular basis. The fundamental difference starts with training. Old Republic Jedi weren't trained as peacekeepers who occasionally fought. They were trained as warriors, who occasionally negotiated. Their lightsaber forms weren't ceremonial. They were battlefield-tested techniques designed to kill efficiently. Take Form 7, Juyo, which was considered too aggressive for prequel-era Jedi. In the Old Republic, it was standard curriculum. These Jedi learned to channel their emotions in combat, to use anger and aggression as tools rather than weaknesses. Revan, arguably the greatest of the Old Republic Jedi, mastered both light and dark side techniques, not as a philosophical exercise, but as practical combat necessities. The idea that you could be too aggressive would have seemed absurd to a Jedi fighting in the Mandalorian Wars. Here's what's crucial. Old Republic Jedi lived in a galaxy where betrayal was expected. They fought alongside Republic soldiers who might be Sith infiltrators. They negotiated with senators who might be dark side cultists. They worked with other Jedi who might fall to the dark side and become their enemies. This created a mindset of constant vigilance that the prequel Jedi completely lacked. When Malak turned on Revan, when the Jedi Exile's companions revealed hidden agendas, when entire Jedi academies fell to the dark side, these weren't shocking betrayals. They were Tuesday. An Old Republic Jedi wouldn't have been paralyzed by their clone commander suddenly opening fire. They would have been mentally prepared for that possibility from day one. Let's talk power levels. The Old Republic Jedi were operating in an era of much stronger force sensitivity across the galaxy. They had access to techniques that were completely lost by the prequel era. Force storm, the ability to create devastating energy attacks. Battle meditation, the power to coordinate entire fleets through the Force. Force lightning wasn't just a Sith power. Light side Jedi like Plo Koon used electric judgment routinely. More importantly, they used these powers in combat without hesitation. A prequel-era Jedi might hesitate to use a force push that could kill multiple enemies. An Old Republic Jedi would have brought down the entire ceiling without a second thought. The Old Republic Jedi also had a very different relationship with military technology. They routinely wore armor, not just cloth robes, but actual battle armor. They used military equipment, commanded starships personally, and integrated technology with force powers in ways the prequel Jedi never imagined. Imagine Commander Cody trying to shoot Obi-Wan. But instead of robes, Obi-Wan is wearing battle armor, and has already sensed the attack through combat precognition, honed by decades of actual warfare. Here's something controversial. The Old Republic Jedi's willingness to use dark side techniques might actually have been an advantage, not because the dark side is stronger, but because they understood it. The prequel Jedi's complete rejection of dark side emotions made them vulnerable to psychological manipulation. But an Old Republic Jedi, who had studied Sith tactics, who understood how fear and anger could be weaponized, would have been much harder to manipulate through these emotions. They wouldn't have been paralyzed by the fear of their own anger. They would have used it. So, let's run some scenarios. How would specific situations from Order 66 have played out differently with Old Republic Jedi? Let's start with the big one, Anakin's assault on the Jedi Temple. In the actual timeline, the Temple guards put up minimal resistance. The younglings were slaughtered without even attempting to fight back. But imagine if the Temple had been defended by Old Republic Jedi. First, they would have had actual military fortifications, energy shields, automated defenses, strategic choke points. The Temple wouldn't have been a peaceful academy. It would have been a fortress. More importantly, the defending Jedi wouldn't have hesitated to kill clone troopers and fallen Jedi alike. We see in Old Republic history that Jedi regularly fought and killed other Jedi who had fallen to the dark side. They wouldn't have been paralyzed by fighting Anakin. They would have recognized a dark Jedi and acted accordingly. The younglings themselves would have been different. Old Republic Jedi began combat training much earlier and much more intensively. Even the children would have been formidable opponents, trained not just in lightsaber combat, but in military tactics and force powers. Now let's look at the battlefield scenarios. Master Aayla Secura on Felucia, cut down by her own troops. Commander Bly gives the order and she's dead before she can react. An Old Republic Jedi in that situation would have been fundamentally different. First, they wouldn't have been standing casually among clone troopers without maintaining force awareness of their intentions. Combat precognition would have been active, constantly. Second, their reaction time would have been enhanced by actual battlefield experience. They would have sensed hostile intent and reacted with lethal force immediately. No confusion, no hesitation, no attempts to understand, just survival. Third, they would have had contingency plans. Old Republic Jedi didn't trust anyone completely, not even their closest allies. They would have had escape routes planned, emergency equipment cached, and alternative extraction methods ready. Master Plo Koon's death is particularly tragic, because it shows how unprepared the prequel Jedi were for betrayal. He's flying alongside clone pilots he trusts completely when they suddenly open fire. But Old Republic Jedi were often accomplished pilots themselves, and more importantly, they were paranoid. A Jedi who had survived the Mandalorian Wars wouldn't have flown in formation with pilots whose intentions he couldn't read through the Force. More likely, an Old Republic Jedi would have been flying solo, or with specially modified ships equipped with better defenses. They would have maintained Force awareness of their wingmen's emotional states, and would have detected the moment the inhibitor chips activated. But here's the biggest difference. I don't think Palpatine could have pulled off his political manipulation in the first place. Old Republic Jedi dealt with Sith Lords regularly. They understood Sith tactics, Sith psychology, and Sith long-term planning. The idea of a Sith Lord hiding in plain sight for decades, manipulating galactic politics, that's exactly the kind of threat they would have been watching for. Moreover, their approach to justice was much more direct. If they had suspected Palpatine of being a Sith Lord, they wouldn't have tried to arrest him legally. They would have confronted him directly, probably with a full strike team, and settled the matter with lightsabers. Let's talk numbers. Order 66 was successful partly because it was coordinated. Thousands of Jedi were killed simultaneously across the galaxy, but the Old Republic Jedi were already organized for warfare. They had military command structures, secure communication networks, and predetermined rally points. When the betrayal started, survivors could have regrouped quickly and coordinated their response. More importantly, their superior Force abilities would have allowed for better communication. Battle meditation could coordinate resistance efforts across entire sectors. Force-sensitive networks could spread warnings faster than any electronic communication. Now, let's be fair. There are some strong arguments against this theory. First, the technological gap. The clone troopers of the prequel era had better equipment than anything in the Old Republic period. Their armor was more advanced, their weapons more precise, their coordination more sophisticated. Second, the sheer scale. Order 66 worked partly because it was a galactic conspiracy involving millions of clones activated simultaneously. Even paranoid, militarized Jedi might have been overwhelmed by the sheer scope of the betrayal. Third, the Sith factor. Palpatine wasn't just any Sith Lord. He was potentially the most powerful Sith in galactic history, backed by a 1,000-year plan. Even experienced Sith hunters might have been outmaneuvered. And finally, there's the question of whether survival would have even mattered. The Old Republic Jedi's more aggressive, militaristic approach might have made them even less popular with the general population, making it easier for Palpatine to justify their elimination. But here's my take. Even if they couldn't have prevented Order 66 entirely, I believe a significant number of Old Republic Jedi would have survived the initial purge and been able to mount an effective resistance. So, could the Old Republic Jedi have survived Order 66? I think the answer is a qualified yes. Not all of them, certainly, not without casualties. Absolutely not. But their warrior culture, their paranoid mindset, their superior Force abilities, and their experience with large-scale betrayal would have given them a fighting chance that the prequel Jedi simply didn't have. The real tragedy of Order 66 wasn't that the Jedi were outnumbered or outgunned, it's that they had forgotten how to be warriors, when the galaxy needed warriors most. The Old Republic Jedi never forgot that lesson. What do you think? Could the ancient Jedi have changed the course of galactic history? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into Star Wars lore and speculation. May the Force be with you, and remember, in the Old Republic, it usually was.